Fit to fill edits involve bringing a long clip down onto the timeline and fitting it into a short space of time, or bringing a short clip down from the timeline and fitting it into a longer space of time. For example, if I replace a clip on the timeline that's quite small with a much longer clip, then if I use fit to fill, it's going to squash this up into fit this particular space. So if I'm putting a long clip in to replace a short clip, then it's going to have to speed up all of that incoming clip to get it into that short amount of space on the timeline. On the other hand, if I had a short clip that I wanted to bring down and replace a much longer clip with, then it would have to slow down my incoming clip to fill the longer space on the timeline. It's probably easiest to demonstrate this rather than just talk about it. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to take a long clip and I'm going to use the over-the-top aerial shot, and I'm going to replace this clip here on the timeline, which is only 1 second in length. So when I drag that over to fit to fill, if you watch the timeline, you'll see that the cheetah clip is replaced with the over-the-top aerial footage. Now, because I've made a kind of a change to it in terms of its frame rate, or the speed at which it's playing back, then Final Cut is asking me to render it. So to render a clip when there's a red bar across the top, I hit Apple and R. Now when I play this back, you'll see that it plays it back extremely fast. That's because I've fitted my long clip to fill a short clip on the timeline. Now there's a few different ways that you can approach this. I've replaced a clip. Now I could have replaced the clip just by leaving the playhead sitting over it to isolate this clip, and then dragged it onto fit to fill, and it would have isolated that clip as being the one that's being replaced. Similarly, I can just set an in and an out point on the timeline, and by setting an in and out on the timeline and already having my in and out on my incoming clip, it's going to squash the duration between these 2 points into these 2 points here. So by going over to fit to fill again, now you'll see that it squashes it in there, and I'll just render it back to watch it, and you should see roughly the same effect. So it's fitting it to fill the amount of time available on the timeline. Now I'm going to look at it from the opposite side, and I'm going to isolate a clip, a long clip. Now I'm isolating the clip on the timeline by placing the playhead over it. I could put an in and an out point here. I could select it, I could do all of those. They'd all be basically doing the same thing. Now, these aren't all necessary in this instance, so I can hit Alt and X to clear my in and out and just leave the playhead sitting over the target clip. So I'm going to use Elephant Tips Over, which is a very short clip, and I'll drag that over, fit to fill, and you'll see that that clip now shows up where my original target clip was. Now because this is being stretched out, it's being slowed down, and it's being slowed down to a speed of 26% of its original speed. So you can see that written there. And if I render this out, it should take slightly longer because of the length of the clip, then I'll be able to play this back, and it'll play back in slow motion. Okay, so Final Cut doesn't do a bad job of rendering back a clip in slow motion. Now that is fit to fill, and fit to fill is used when you absolutely have to get a certain clip into a certain duration on the timeline. And quite often it'll just be a subtle change in the speed that you might just have to add on a few frames to it just to fill a space on the timeline. Again, this isn't something that you would do to create special effects such as slow motion and fast motion. That there are other ways of doing that in Final Cut Pro, but this is a handy edit to know if you are stuck and you need to get a clip into a certain amount of time on the timeline. So that's the fit to fill edit.